The Grave Robbers Chronicles, Volume 1, Part 1, 7-Star Lu Palace. Chapter 1, Blood Corpse. 50 years ago, Changsha Dart Summit. 4 grave robbers were squatting on a mound, all of them silent as they stared at the Luoyang shovel on the ground. The shovel head was holding the old soil that had just been brought out of the ground. Strangely enough, this soil was constantly seeping a bright red liquid, as if it had just been dipped in blood. "This is a big problem," Lao Yantul said as he knocked his tobacco out onto the ground. "There's a blood corpse down below. We're all going to die down there if we aren't careful." "Are we going down or not? Just give us a one-word answer, yes or no. There's no need to be so long-winded," a young man with only one eye said. "If your old legs make it too inconvenient for you, just don't go down. My brother and I will go instead. Whatever it is, we'll just shoot it." Instead of getting angry, Lao Yantou just laughed and said to the bearded man next to him, "Your son is quite impulsive and arrogant. You have to educate him more, otherwise something might happen. In this business, just giving a box gun doesn't mean you're set." The bearded man glared at the young man. "Why are you talking to the old man like that? You were still in your mother's belly when the old man was robbing graves." "Why, am I wrong? Didn't senior grave robbers used to say that blood corpses are a good thing? There must be a lot of treasure below. If we don't go down, we'll definitely regret it." "You dare talk back to me?" The bearded man raised his hand to hit him, but Lao Yantou blocked it with his pipe. "Don't beat him. He's not so different from how you were when you were younger. This is what we call the lower beam will be crooked if the upper beam isn't straight." When the one-eyed boy saw that his father was being scolded, he lowered his head and started to snicker. Lao Yantou coughed and then hit the one-eyed boy upside the head with a stick. "What are you laughing at? When it comes to blood corpses, anything can happen. Last time your uncle dug up this kind of thing in Luoyang and has been crazy ever since. Nobody knows what happened to him. Later I'll go down first and then you follow behind. Aryadze, you grab the Tuhadze and bring up the rear. Sanyadze, you'll stay here. If all 4 of us go down at once and something happens, we won't be able to escape quickly. You'll hold on to one end of the Tuhadze's rope and pull things out as soon as we give a shout." The youngest boy was unconvinced. "I don't want to. You're playing favorites. I'll tell Mom about this." Lao Yantou laughed. Look. Sanyadze is still such a brat. Stop making trouble and wait here. I'll find you a golden knife later." "I don't want you to find it. I want to find it myself." The one-eyed youth immediately became angry and grabbed his brother's ear. Are you looking for trouble? Are you trying to make me mad on purpose?" The youngest boy seemed to have been beaten a lot and often. When he saw that his big brother was really angry, he became too scared to say anything. He looked straight at his father for help, but his father unexpectedly went to put their equipment in order. His brother seemed pleased with this and added, "Why are you such a disappointment? The old man won't help you this time. If you try and raise a fuss, I'll beat you up." Lao Yantou smacked him on the shoulder and shouted, "Boys, let's get our equipment." With that said, he started shoveling dirt like a whirlwind. Half an hour later, a grave robber's tunnel with no end in sight had been dug. Except for his brother who came up from time to time for air, the youngest boy couldn't even hear any sounds coming from the hole. He became impatient and shouted into the hole, "Grandpa, did you dig through?" After a few seconds, a faint voice came from further inside. "We don't know. You stay there and secure the rope." It was his brother's voice. Then he heard Lao Yantou cough. "Be quiet. Listen, there's movement." Then there was dead silence. The young boy was too scared to speak, knowing that there must be something wrong below. At this time, he suddenly heard a creepy sound coming from the hole, almost like the croaking of a toad. Then his elder brother shouted from below, "Sanyadze, pull!" Not one to hesitate, he yanked on the Tuhadze's rope and pulled. But he had only pulled it a little bit when something suddenly seemed to grab the rope from below. The opposing force even started pulling the rope towards the grave robber's tunnel. The young boy never thought that this kind of thing would happen, so he was almost pulled into the hole as well. He used his quick wits to immediately tie the rope around his waist, and then leaned his whole body backwards until his body was almost at a 30-degree angle to the ground. This was a trick he used when he was playing tug-of-war with the other boys in the village. With all of his weight on the rope, even a mule couldn't beat him. Sure enough, in this way he was able to hold his own against the thing in the hole. Both sides continued to struggle, but neither could gain the upper hand. After more than 10 seconds of his stalemate, he heard a gunshot come from the tunnel, and then his father shouted, "Sanyatsu, run!" He felt the rope loosen, and then the Tuhatsu popped out of the hole with a whoosh. There seemed to be something hanging on it, but the young boy didn't have time to look at it now. He knew that something must have happened below, so he grabbed the Tuhatsu and turned to run. He didn't dare stop until he was more than a few miles away. When he held the Tuhatsu out in his arms to take a look at it, he suddenly cried out in fright. As it turned out, a bloody severed hand was hooked onto the Tuhatsu. He recognized that hand and couldn't help but start crying. It was clearly his brother's. Even if he wasn't dead, it seemed that his brother had been crippled. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but clench his teeth. He wanted to go back and save his father and brother, but as soon as he looked back, he saw a blood-red thing crouching behind him and looking right at his eyes. The young boy wasn't a complete fool. He had followed his father to many tombs before and had seen a lot of strange things. He knew that anything could happen underground. The most important thing was to not make a fuss and to be pragmatic. You had to know that no matter how dangerous a ghost was, it wasn't more powerful than a living person. Whether it was a black zombie or a white zombie, it had to abide by the laws of physics. If a bullet hit and destroyed it, then there was nothing to be afraid of. With that in mind, he calmed his racing heart and started backing away. He pulled the box gun from his waistband and got ready to fire a few shots in quick succession. As long as there was any movement from that blood-red thing, he would shower it in a rain of bullets. But he didn't expect that thing to suddenly stand up. When the young boy took a closer look, he felt his scalp go numb and his stomach churn. This was clearly a person who had been skinned. He was covered in blood, as if he had squeezed himself out of the skin, but it was truly a miracle that such a person could still walk around in that condition. Was this the true face of a blood corpse? As he was thinking, the blood corpse suddenly leaned forward and rushed towards him. The young boy was immediately face to face with it, the smell of that face dripping with blood and its noxious scent assaulting his nose. The young boy took advantage of the situation and fell backward while firing a volley of bullets into the thing's chest at close range. The distance was so close that all of the bullets packed a big punch, causing that thing's blood to fly everywhere. As it took several steps backward, the young boy felt a flash of triumph. He once again pointed his gun at the thing's head and pulled the trigger. But then he heard a click. The gun was jammed. His great-uncle had dug up this old box gun from a warlord's tomb back in the day. It hadn't been used in many years, but unfortunately, he had been running around with his father over the past few years and didn't have time to maintain it. There were very few opportunities to shoot in ordinary times, so who would have expected it to jam now? But the young boy wouldn't give up so easily. When he saw the gun wasn't working well, he immediately pulled his arm back and threw the gun at the blood corpse with all of his strength. Regardless of whether he missed or not, he turned his head and ran away. This time, he didn't even dare to look back. He saw a big tree in front of him and immediately started running towards it, thinking that the blood-red thing wouldn't be able to climb trees. But at this time, he suddenly tripped and fell. His whole face smashed up against a stump, and his nose and mouth were filled with blood suddenly. The young boy slapped the ground hard, feeling fierce anger in his heart. Just why was he so unlucky? At this time, he heard the sound of the wind behind him, and he knew that it was his time to leave. I'm going to die. So be it, he thought harshly. He remained lying on the ground, not bothering to get up. With an unexpected turn of events, the blood corpse stepped on him as if it hadn't seen him at all, its bloody footprints immediately leaving marks on his back. The blood corpse was surprisingly heavy, and as soon as it put its weight down, the young boy felt a tickle in his throat, as though all of his bile in his stomach was about to come up. Moreover, the place on his back that he stepped on was immediately itchy, and his eyes became hazy. He quickly realized that he might have been poisoned, and the toxicity was very high. In a daze, he saw that his brother's severed hand, which was lying not too far away, actually seemed to be holding something. He blinked hard, took a closer look, and discovered that it was an ancient piece of silk. Whatever brother was so desperate to bring out definitely isn't ordinary, he thought to himself. And now I don't even know what happened to them. In any case, I have to take good care of this, so that even if I die, they can find it whenever they find my body. That way, brother's hand won't have been severed for nothing, and I won't have died in vain. As he thought through this, he struggled to crawl over to his brother's severed hand. When he finally reached it, he forcibly opened his brother's clenched fist, took the piece of silk out, and then stuffed it into his own sleeve. At this time, there was a buzzing sound in his ears. It felt like his eyes were covered in a layer of gauze, and his hands and feet began to feel cold. Based on his previous experiences, the crotch of his pants must be covered in urine right now. After all, people who died from ugly corpse poisoning suffered from very ugly deaths. What he hoped for the most right now was that the girl in the next village over wouldn't see him like this. His muddled thoughts were running wild, and his brain had stopped listening to him, but at this time he began to vaguely hear the strange noise that had come from the grave robber's tunnel earlier. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. After fighting with the blood corpse for so long, he hadn't heard it make that noise, so why was it making it again now? Could it be that thing he saw just now wasn't a blood corpse? But then what did he see? And it was a pity that he could hardly think at this time. He raised his head out of reflex and saw a huge, strange face leaning down and looking at him. Those two pupil-less eyes were completely empty, and didn't have a spark of life in them at all.